Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today we're going to look at 8 new decks from Pokemon card 151. 151 does come out this Friday, and I wanted to look at some early decks. Now, the reason I really want to do this video was because this video is actually going to be my 151st video on the second channel. It kind of had to be a video talking about 151 content somehow, and I've already done enough 151 content. It was kind of hard to come up with an idea, but I did like the idea of maybe looking at some early decks, getting y'all hyped and ready for the new set release, and it's too perfect not to do a video like this. But yeah, I got 8 decks from Japan to look at here from a Book, which I will leave a link down below to their website if you want to go ahead and see these lists for yourself and see even more decks. Book does like post daily lists from Japan, so definitely go check them out down below. And let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite new deck that you cannot wait to play when the set drops on Friday? And of course, if you're new to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. Help me on the road to reaching 8,000 subs. We're super close, so maybe we can hit 8K by this video. Who knows? But yeah, hope y'all are going to go on to enjoy the video. If you do, leave a like, and let's take a look at 8 new decks from Pokemon card 151. First off, we got Blastoise CX. Blastoise is looking like a new promising archetype to come out of the new set. Of course, it combines really well with Palkia V-Star. With Palkia V-Star Star Portal V-Star power, you can put 3 water energy from a discard pile to your Pokemon any way you like. You can use it to power up Blastoise fairly easily with its attack that for 2 water energy does 140 damage, and then you can discard up to 2 water energy cards from your hand. It does 140 more damage for each water discarded in this way. So, of course, if you discard 2 water energy from your hand, the Blastoise CX is going to be doing 280 damage, which is really strong. Of course, that's going to knock out most V-Star Pokemon. You can combine that with Choice Belt or Cleansing Gloves, and then you're knocking out Gardevoir and Mew VMAX, so you can hit some pretty good numbers with Blastoise. But yeah, Blastoise, you do have to probably pair with Palkia. It does require 2 water energy to attack, which is not the worst thing ever. You can obviously attack, and with Blastoise's bulkiness, it's going to be very hard for Blastoise to get 1 KO'd, but it is still good to have the Palkia because you're able to still build it up in a single turn. And Palkia isn't the worst attacker either. It does have that sub-space swell attack that allows you to do 60 plus 20 more damage for each of your bench Pokemon and your opponent's bench Pokemon. So Palkia can hit some pretty high numbers. It's a really good like early game aggressor, which is one of the things that makes Palkia so good in this Blastoise deck, is how good Palkia will be in the early game to put on pressure on your opponent. The other thing I like about Blastoise is it's so easy to put into play. I mean, most Stage 2s right now, you have to rely very heavily on drawing into pieces. A lot of lists have to play Arceus V-Star, but Blastoise can play Irida. Irida just literally lets you go Rare Candy Blastoise, so it's super easy to get a Blastoise EX into play thanks to Irida, allowing you to find a Rare Candy Blastoise super easily with the effect of Irida. It's one of the things that does allow Blastoise to work so well, is how easy it'll be to put into play. The deck will have to play Bibarel. The main selling point of Blastoise, of course, are going to do 140 damage. You have to discard 2 water energy from your hand, but you can get the energy back with either energy retrieval or superior energy retrieval to put water energy back into your hand so that you can attack again the following turn with Blastoise over and over again and keep doing the 280 damage with its attack. And in order to find those cards a bit easier, of course, Irida can find you them, but we also have Bibarel. With the 2/2 Bibarel, you can play cards like superior energy retrieval, discarding 2 cards from your hand, and allows you to draw through your deck a little bit more. Bibarel, I think, is the perfect partner in this deck. It's super easy to set up. Radiant Greninja is also good to have in the deck, as you can obviously use concealed cards to set you up a little bit more, and also you have the ability to use Moonlight Shuriken if you ever need it be. The deck will, of course, have the 2 Raihan to use it, try to get Blastoise powered up too. I think Raihan's pretty good. You can't use Melanie with Blastoise. You can use Melanie with Palkia, just not Blastoise. So I think Raihan obviously would be better to have in the deck. The Letter of Encouragement is also really cool in here. When something is knocked out, you can search your deck for up to 3 basic energy and put them in your hand. So, Letter of Encouragement is a great way to get the water energy in your hand with Blastoise. You can, like Irida for Rare Candy Blastoise, play Letter of Encouragement, get 3 waters out of your deck, and the next thing you know, you're doing 280 damage out of nowhere. But yeah, that is this list here for Blastoise. I think Blastoise is definitely going to be a really fun deck to play, and actually could have potential. Again, it works really well with Palkia, hits really good numbers, is extremely tanky. What's not to love about Blastoise EX? Obviously, I had to include Alakazam in this video. Alakazam EX is another really fascinating new deck to come out of the new set, with Alakazam's attack allowing you to attack from the bench, something we've never seen before. Now, with Alakazam being able to attack from the bench, that means you gotta have something in your active spot. Now, what are you gonna have in your active spot? Well, there are a lot of decent options here, and this list here that I got off Book does provide some pretty good options. The first one is gonna be Klefki. Of course, when Klefki's in the active spot, basic Pokemon in play have no abilities. So that means you are going to shut off your opponent's Comfeys, Greninjas, even something like Xianpao and Genesect V get shut off. So it really does a good job of slowing down your opponent while you're just constantly attacking from the bench with Alakazam. Another really good wall is the Mimikyu. Mimikyu is immune to Pokemon V and EXs, meaning that Mimikyu has the ability to potentially not even take damage. And the nice thing is, if you're knocking out the only way your opponent has to attack Mimikyu with Alakazam, eventually Mimikyu is just going to sit there and stall your opponent out, which is really good. Of course, you can attack with Mimikyu as the deck does play Psychic Energy, so if worst comes to worst, that is always an option. There's also Palkia. Now, this is a very fascinating card. Now, when Palkia is in the active spot, your opponent cannot play a Stadium card from their hand. So basically with Palkia, what you do is you put in the active spot and you put a Path to the Peak in play, as this list here does play 3 copies of Path. You put a Path to the Peak in play with Palkia in the active, and your opponent cannot remove the Path, meaning that there will be a chance your opponent cannot play the game. A lot of decks right now do get shut off by Path, and not every deck plays Pumpkaboo or Worker to try to get around Palkia. Of course, you can get around Palkia with Escape Rope or Boss's Order, but they have to find those cards in order to counter the Palkia. And that's what makes the Palkia so deadly, is that if you can stick it in the active spot with Path, and your opponent can't play the game, your opponent will just be a sitting duck while you just sit there and constantly spam Alakazam's attack, while your opponent can do nothing about the Path to Peak, as Palkia prevents your opponent from being able to bump it. This list also plays Bibarel. I think Bibarel is the most straightforward draw engine to play in a deck like this. You don't need to play Kirlia or anything like that. You probably don't need to play any V-Stars. You can probably just get away with Bibarel. The nice thing about this deck is all the one-prize wall Pokemon that you can put in the active spot while Alakazam sits on the bench. Alakazam has 310 HP. It is very hard to knock out Alakazam in one hit. So even though Alakazam will get bossed quite a bit throughout a match, it's going to be hard to one-hit KO it, meaning that with all these walls in the active, your opponent has to go through a lot of one-prizers before they can get to the Alakazam, and that's the nice thing about it. The deck does play some heavy hand disruption with 3 Iono, 2 Judge, and a Roxanne. Being able to disrupt your opponent's hand constantly is going to be very crucial, as you're going to be able to slow your opponent down from being able to play the game, because while you have these annoying walls stopping your opponent from doing anything, you can also disrupt their hand and putting on a ton of pressure to your opponent. That is the beauty of having access to the hand disruption in this deck. I'm really excited for Alakazam. I think it's got a lot of potential, and I'm really going to enjoy playing it and making my opponent suffer when they can't attack Mimikyu or they can't get out of Path, or even doing anything against the Klefki. But yeah, Alakazam's looking pretty promising. Well, it is a stage 2. As long as you get into play and you're able to slow the opponent down, I think it's going to be pretty decent. I know this one's going to get a lot of people excited, and that is going to be the new Jynx EX. Jynx EX is looking pretty promising, as it is another insta-KO attacker. However, this card is a little bit different than the other insta-KOers. So its first attack for a water and a double turbo allows you to knock your opponent's active Pokemon out if they are asleep. So that's pretty good. I mean, if your opponent's active is asleep, it just immediately gets KO'd, which is really powerful. Now, the way we can put them to sleep is through Hypno's ability. So when you play Hypno onto your Drowsy, you can leave your opponent's active Pokemon asleep, allowing you to then knock it out with Jynx, which is pretty good. And obviously, Jynx being a water Pokemon does, of course, mean it's going to synergize with cards like Greninja, Palkia V-Star, and Irida, allowing you to utilize Jynx's attack. Now, unfortunately, there is no Scoop Net in the format anymore. That's like the big deal with this Jynx deck, is without Scoop Net, it does get a little bit hard to be able to constantly loop Hypno over. So you're probably going to get a couple of Hypno uses in a game, but that's perfectly fine. You don't need to use it all the time, as if you have Palkia as your backup attacker, that might be more than enough. Jynx can be really good to knock out those big wall Pokemon with a lot of HP. Something like a Charizard, a Mew VMAX, any big VMAX card is probably going to be fine to KO with Jynx, as it's going to be a big wall that you can get over, and then Palkia can kind of deal with the little cards. Thanks to Jynx needing only a water and a double turbo, you can just Raihan to it, play double turbo. You can put 1 energy on it with a Star Portal, so there is some synergy there with Palkia and Jynx, and I think they combine pretty well together. And of course, with Hypno, you're able to knock your opponent's active Pokemon out immediately. And this is the list here. Pretty straightforward deck. I mean, the Jynx deck doesn't really need to do too much. I mean, all you have to do is just put a Hypno down, put them to sleep, and then you have the double turbo to build up your Jynx. But Jynx is looking pretty good. You can probably go up to 3/3 Hypno if you really wanted to, just to make sure you have more Hypnos in your deck, so you're able to utilize Jynx a little bit easier in a game. But of course, if Hypno gets knocked out, you can always Super Rod it back, and then bench a Drowsy, and then redo Jynx again. So you can definitely get multiple use out of Jynx in a game if you're lucky. And I think that this deck is going to be a lot of fun to play, and it's looking promising as a fun deck, as Jynx being able to KO something in one hit is definitely very powerful, and something that will probably make Jynx work in the long run. Next up, we have Wigglytuff EX. Wigglytuff EX is going to be a brand new deck that is looking pretty annoying, because Wigglytuff's got the ability where if it does have a special energy on it, it gets plus 100 HP. Wigglytuff has 250 HP, so of course with a special energy being on it, you're going to be able to go up to 350 HP, which is going to make it extremely tanky and very bulky. Now the cool thing about Wigglytuff is you can combine it with the Wigglytuff from Paldea Vault, where it allows you to, once you're in your turn, attach a therapeutic energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. So what you can do is you can use therapeutic energy with Wigglytuff and attach it to your Wigglytuff EX, and then you can attach a double turbo energy to your Wigglytuff EX. Wigglytuff EX attack does 90 plus 90 more damage if you play a supporter card from your hand. So as long as you play something like a Boss, an Iono, a Research, you're going to be able to abuse the attack. The other cool thing is Charon's Care. So of course Charon's Care allows you to pick up one of your colorless Pokemon with damage counters and put it back in your hand. So what you can do in this deck is you can use Charon's Care to pick up the Wigglytuff, and then if you have another Jigglypuff in play already from the previous turn, you can promote that, evolve it, attach a double turbo, and then use the Paldea Wigglytuff's ability to reattach the therapeutic energy, essentially allowing you to loop your Wigglytuff every single turn and heal it. And again, with 350 HP with Wigglytuff's ability, it's going to make it very hard to knock out. The deck also plays Snorlax. Snorlax is another good card with therapeutic energy, and Wigglytuff, of course, it's a very strong single prize attacker, and with a therapeutic energy on it, when Snorlax does its thumping snore attack, it doesn't go to sleep, and then if it doesn't get KO'd, you can just do the attack again. The deck also plays Mew EX. Another very strong card is it does require 3 colorless energy, so you can use Wigglytuff to put a therapeutic energy and then a double turbo energy onto your Mew EX and then attack with its attack Genome Hack. And it also plays Radiant Charizard, another really cool option in this deck, allowing you to use a fire and a colorless energy. What you can do is you can attach a fire energy to your Radiant Charizard and then use Wigglytuff's ability to put a therapeutic energy on it, building Charizard up semi-quickly in one turn, which is cool. So definitely a bit of a more kind of a toolbox approach, and I kind of like this idea. Using the Bibarel Scovet engine as your draw engine is also really good. The one thing you're going to have to watch out for when playing Wigglytuff ultimately will be Path to the Peak, as it does shut off your ability, meaning that Wigglytuff will not have 350 HP and it'll only have the 250 HP. But not a lot of decks right now are really using Path anymore. Even the decks that do play Path, like Miraidon, are starting to go back to playing more Beach Courts now, so it might not have to worry too much about Path going forward, but definitely this Wigglytuff deck is looking to be pretty good, and this actually could have potential. Again, you have a lot of different attackers to choose from. The Snorlax will be good against Lawson, Mew will be good against Giratina, Charizard will be a nice big heavy hitter against other V-Stars, and of course, Wigglytuff being super tanky is going to make it very annoying to KO. So this deck looks pretty fun, and I'm definitely excited to give Wigglytuff EX a try when it releases. Honestly, Golem EX is looking pretty good in the new set. Now, of course, Golem is a fighting type, and that'll be nice when you're getting paired against Miraidon and Arceus Miraidon, especially as Miraidon gets even better with 151. Golem's 2 attacks kind of flow well together, and that's because of the first attack, which for 1 energy does 50 damage, and then during your next turn, this Pokemon's attacks will do 120 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So then that first attack is then going to be doing 170 damage for 1 energy. But then the second attack will then do 180 damage, but if you use the first attack the turn earlier and you don't get escape roped or bossed, that attack is going to do 300 damage because it's going to do 120 more damage. Now, if you have a double turbo energy on your Golem, unfortunately the attack will only be doing 280, which, I mean, it's not unfortunate, but it's still 280 damage, actually a lot of damage to do regardless. But point staying, Golem is going to do a ton of damage as long as you do the first attack. Now, the way that this build here is using it is just kind of the first attack. I mean, 1 for 170 isn't bad. Obviously, 170 damage is pretty clean. You're 2-shotting most things. You're sometimes 1-shotting stuff. And then, of course, you can play 4 copies of Cheryl. Now, that first attack only needs 1 copy of Fighting Energy to work, so all you really have to do is go of Fighting Energy, hit for 170, take a hit, and then Cheryl to heal your Golem, and then attach another energy, and then do the attack again, and then do 170 again, and do that over and over again. And when you need to take a big clean and 1 KO, you can do that second attack. That does 180 damage, so then you can do 280 damage to your opponent, and hopefully knock them out. Now, this list here does play 3 Avery. I think this probably would want to play Iono over Avery. It does play a pretty heavy count of Bibarel. Plays 3-3 Bibarel and 2 Scovet. So, kind of just capitalized on a very straightforward build. You could experiment with maybe playing Arceus V-Star in the Golem deck. The Mew's not bad. Mew does find you rare candy a bit easier, which will be nice to have. Path is also really good with Golem. I mean, Golem doesn't really need any other stadium. You could play Lake Acuity with Golem to make it a little bit more tankier. But I think Path is honestly just probably the better stadium to play within Golem. You could also play rocky chestplate with Golem so that it's even more bulkier. And if you want to play rock chestplate and Lake of Cutie, you can give Golem minus 50 damage from attacks. You could play Radiant Serena. If you're playing Path, you might not be able to get away with it, but I do think that Golem has a lot of potential in the format as a really fun archetype. I can't wait to try Golem out, and I'm definitely interested to see how it does. I think this build here maybe wants to play like Iono and Judge or something, and even Raihan could go in this Golem list here, but this is one of the only Golem decks I could find on Pokebook, and I like this build. It's very straightforward, and the 4 Cheryl makes a lot of sense in combination with Golem's first attack, and it can be a pretty annoying card if it can't get 1-hit KO'd, and with all the Miraidon running around, who knows, Golem might be pretty good coming in the new set. Venomoth is looking pretty annoying to play against, as it does have an item lock attack. So that first attack for 1 grass does 30 damage, and then it confuses your opponent's active Pokemon, and then also prevents them from being able to play item cards during their next turn. And of course, every deck right now really does rely heavily on items like Rare Candy, Ultra Ball, Nest Ball, Switch, Electric Generator, Mirage Gate, all that stuff gets shut off by Venomoth. And while it's only doing 30 damage, the idea behind Venomoth is it's trying to slow the opponent down. The confusion is really nice, so if you're playing against like a big Pokemon with a big retreat or something, you can just like hit them with Venomoth, and then they're confused and item locked, and they can't switch out of it because they can't play items. But the way that Venomoth is seen play here, and a few builds I've seen from Japan are actually utilizing it with Torterra. So Torterra does have that attack for 50 damage. It does 50 damage for each evolution Pokemon you have in play. And this deck just plays a bunch of evolutions. We got the Torterra, we got Bibarel, we got Venomoth, and we have Gengar, which can be put into play for free if it's in your discard pile and there's a bench spot open. And there's also Luxray, which you can of course play from your hand on your bench if you're behind in prizes, which when you're attacking with a Pokemon that only does 30 damage and you're falling behind a little bit, it's pretty likely you're going to be able to play a Luxray down. And that's the idea behind this Venomoth deck, is you can slowly item lock your opponent while you slowly work towards building up Torterra. You do, of course, have Grotle, which Grotle's ability allows you to get a grass Pokemon out of your deck into your hand, so you can use Grotle to chain multiple Grotles. You can also use Grotle as a way to find a Venonat and Venomoth, which is nice. So if you want to set more Venomoths up, you do have Grotle to help you get there. So yeah, you're just trying to slow the opponent down while you just kind of build up your board with Torterra. The deck also does play some heavy hand disruption with item lock, of course. Being able to item lock and put your opponent to 4 cards with Judge is going to be pretty annoying to play against, because sometimes they get judged into a bunch of unplayable cards when they are item locked. And then of course Iono can be pretty good too. The Path is cool. Of course, Path item lock also is a pretty dirty combo that this deck does have the luxury of pulling off, and that one of Calamitous Wasteland, which makes basic Pokemon's retreat cost 1 more, as long as it's not a fighting Pokemon, but there's not that many fighting Pokemon right now. So with the retreat cost and the confusion and the item lock, it's going to be very annoying for your opponent to do anything with Venomoth's attack. And that's the idea of the deck. You just slow the opponent down, build up Torterra, and then in the late game, Torterra can start swinging for some pretty high numbers. It can do up to 300 damage when you have a full board of evolutions in play. And of course, you do have the ability to attack with Luxray as a lightning attacker. You have the Gengar even if you want to use Gengar. It doesn't do like hit for weakness, but it is an attacker because you do play the 4 copies of Reverse Energy, which does work with Torterra too for that Evo Press attack. That does require the 2 energy. But yeah, Venomoth with Torterra is looking like the best way to play Venomoth, and it could be pretty good to have another item lock card in the format, because right now Bayonet just kind of ain't doing much in our game. It's going to be really satisfying to play Arbok EX against Lost Box. So Arbok, of course, for 3 Dark Energy, can do 150 damage, and then your opponent discards 2 cards from their hand. That's a very strong effect. Of course, you can combine Arbok's attack with Iono and Roxanne, make your opponent's hand super duper small, and then you Arbok them and put them to a 0-card hand. And if they have a 0-card hand and there's no draw in play, they are not going to be able to play the game, and that's really, really strong. Of course, you can also use the new Snatch Arm here, which we do see, which allows you to look at your opponent's hand and then choose a Pokemon you find there and put it at the bottom of their deck. So if your opponent has 3 cards in hand, you can hopefully, if they have a Pokemon in there, which the odds aren't even that low, you can remove the Pokemon from their hand, and then, of course, you can hit them with Arbok and make them lose the rest of the cards in their hand, which is really, really strong. There's also the extra tight belt, which does allow Arbok to have a little bit more bulk, which is also going to be a pretty good card to combine with Arbok. So the issue with Arbok is it's not as good in the early game, right? When you're playing Iono, you're only giving your opponent 6 cards. Arbok is not as good in the early game as it is in the late game. I think in the late game, Arbok shines a little bit better. So the way to play Arbok, it looks like, is going to be with Darkrai V-Star. Of course, Darkrai V-Star does, of course, do a ton of damage for each Dark Energy in place. You can build up a ton of Dark Energy with Darkrai. You can use Galarian Moltres V. You could play the baby Moltres if you want to. And of course, with Dark Patch, you can accelerate a bunch of energy into play, and then out of nowhere, you can start attacking with Darkrai, and then maybe once like a Darkrai or 2 gets knocked out, then you can come and swing in with Arbok EX and start removing cards from your opponent's hand and shrinking their hand. I mean, the deck also plays Path, which you don't usually want to play Path within Darkrai, but in the later half of the game, when you can put that Path into play and slow your opponent down, you can then start spamming Arbok and Roxanne and Iono and making your opponent have no cards in hand and making them unable to play the game. It's going to be really fun to do this against Lost Box because Lost Box infamously does not like having small hands. And if they don't like having small hands, they're also not going to like having no hand whatsoever. Imagine Ioning a Lost Zone deck or Roxanne Lost Zone deck to 2 cards and then hitting with Arbok and then removing all the cards in their hand. And then out of nowhere, they're unable to do anything. No Mirage Gate plays, no Sableye plays. Maybe the most they can do is spit you. They will have access to Flower Selecting to help them out, but when they have a 0-card hand, they're not really going to have that many cards to work off of, especially if you've removed any switching cards with Arbok's attack. So while it is a good late-game attacker, Arbok is going to be a really strong new card, and it's probably going to be very deadly in the meta. When combined with Roxanne and Iono, it's going to be pretty annoying to play against, and I definitely am excited to give Arbok a try. So you'll have to see if it is good with Darkrai, or maybe it'll work by itself. I mean, again, it's not the greatest attacker in the early game. If maybe you have to play Judge to kind of make it a bit better in the earliest stages of the game, but I do think Arbok will be fun to play regardless as a late-game swinger, and when combined with Roxanne, Iono, and Snatch Arm, it's going to be very fun to play, and it's not going to be not very fun for your opponent, but it'll be fun for you to shrink your opponent's hand to 0 cards. The last deck I wanted to look at here was the new Electrode. Electrode is looking like a pretty strong new single prize deck. Of course, Electrode does have that tool drop attack, and that's good as it is a single prizer, and the other tool droppers we've had in the format, like the Rodoms, have obviously been 2 prizers. So having a single prizer do it is going to be a little bit nicer to have access to. Of course, Electrode does do 20 damage plus 40 more damage for each tool card you discarded from all of your Pokemon. So it's a pretty strong attack. Of course, you can infinitely get rid of as many tools as you want. Now, the way to play Electrode is going to be with Snorlax. Now, Snorlax here does have that ability where once you're in your turn, you can put 2 leftover cards from discard pile back into your hand. So with Electrode's attack, you can discard 4 leftovers to hit pretty hard, and then the next turn you can just use Snorlax to put 2 back. Now you will need multiple Snorlax to get multiple leftovers back, but you can use Snorlax to get a bunch of leftovers back from your discard pile back in your hand, basically giving you a infinite tool engine for Electrode. It allows you to get 4 tools back every turn for its attack, and that is pretty nice, obviously, because you will eventually run out of tools. I mean, you'd have to play a ton of tools to constantly attack Electrode every single turn, but at least when we have Snorlax to get you the tools back, you won't run out of tools as easily, and you can do a consistent amount of damage every turn, knowing that you at least have 4 tools to discard for Electrode's attack. The deck does have Miraidon, which allows you to set up your Lightning Pokemon like Voltorb. The deck also plays Rotom. Now, Rotom does have that ability to draw 3 cards, but it also does attack too. I don't know if the Rotom is honestly necessary within the deck, but it is something that this list does play. It also plays Oranguru, which when it's in the active spot, you can search your deck for up to 2 tool cards and put them in your hand. So Oranguru can be a nice way to find tool cards if you want to play the Oranguru. If I were to play Electrode, I would probably just keep it as a single prize deck. I don't know if I would even play the Miraidon. I definitely don't think you need the Rotom or even the Oranguru. Well, actually, Rotom might not be terrible. You can discard a bunch of tools with Electrode and then send them all to Lost Zone in the later half of the game with Rotom. So maybe Rotom is worth playing. You could probably get away with playing the Rotom V-Star. But the Oranguru and Miraidon I'm not too sold on, but I do like the idea of keeping Electrode a single prize deck option. But the Snorlax is going to be great as, again, with the leftover cards, you're able to get them back every turn for Electrode's attack, so you can keep constantly attacking with Electrode every single turn. Electrode only does need 1 lightning to attack, so it's very, very cost efficient. You just slap lightning energy on it, and then you just start attacking, and that's really good. And again, if you want to attack with Rotom, you can. If you want to try to put Rotom in the deck, or you can keep the deck as a single prize option. Either way, Electrode could be a really strong new single prize deck to come out of the new set, thanks to Snorlax allowing you to get back those leftover cards. And there you have it. That is it for today's video, looking at all of these new Pokemon Card 151 deck lists. I'm excited for the new set to drop on Friday. It's going to be a great time. New set coming out, a lot of new decks to play, more content to make. It's going to be a blast. And I cannot wait to play all these new decks with you all and all that good stuff. And again, this was my 151st video on the second channel, and it had to be a 151 video. Like, I was going to do a video looking at, decks from Japan, or I was going to do a video kind of looking at online tournament results, or if the top 8 results from, like, one of the regionals came out, but I was like, we gotta do a 151 related video, because again, this is my 151st video on the second channel. It's it kind of lines up perfectly. There's no way I couldn't do that. But hope you enjoyed the video here on the second channel. If you did, leave a like, and of course, if you do, make sure to subscribe down below. We are getting super close to 8,000 subs. So if you want to make sure we, help me reach that goal, make sure to subscribe down below and all that good stuff. I'll leave a link to Pokégo Book down below if you want to go ahead and look at all kinds of different 151 lists, and you can see where I got these deck lists from. And let me know in the comments below, what new deck are you most looking forward to playing when the new set drops? And that'll be it for me. Have a good day. Bye-bye.